The thing about humans is that they lie. Not in the malicious way the Vorthik do, where deception is woven into every social contract. No, humans lie about themselves. They lie constantly, casually, like breathe. Take Mira Kowalski. When she first arrived at Xenith Academy, every species-specific intake form flagged her homeworld as Category 9 Deathworld. The administration clerk, a four-armed Palaxian named Grieve, who had processed 10,000 applications, actually stopped mid-motion when he saw it. His primary eyes widened, then his secondary eyes, then all four of his hands trembled just slightly, as he stamped her clearance documents. But when Mira walked into Sector 7's common area that first day, she didn't look dangerous. She looked small, soft. Her skin was this pale peachy color that seemed absurdly vulnerable, and she smiled at everyone with these blunt little teeth that couldn't tear through anything tougher than processed nutrition paste. She introduced herself to the other students with this apologetic shrug. "Hey, I'm Mira, from Earth. Nice to meet you all." Clorn, a Rothic exchange student built like a mobile fortress with chitinous plating that could deflect plasma rounds, actually laughed. Not unkindly, just surprised. "You, from a Class 9 world?" Mira had scratched the back of her head, looking embarrassed. "Yeah, I know. Pretty boring compared to you guys, right?" That was 3 months ago. 3 months of Mira being the quiet one, the polite one, the one who always said "excuse me" and "sorry" and "thank you so much," that it became a running joke among the Sector 7 students. "Careful, you might breathe too loud near the human," Vecna would tease. Vecna was Zelthian, all crystalline exoskeleton and confidence. Her species had conquered 4 star systems before they even developed faster-than-light travel. She wasn't being cruel, exactly. Just dismissive. Mira would laugh along. That was the thing. She always laughed along. "I'm Thex, by the way. Glorbian, which means I'm about as middle-of-the-road as galactic species get. We're the accountants of the universe. The administrators. We notice things. We file them away, and we generally don't make waves." But I noticed Mira. I noticed how she never ate in the cafeteria during peak hours. How she always took the stairs instead of the gravitational lift, even when we were heading to level 40. How her hands were always moving, like she was calculating distances and trajectories to everything around her without even thinking about it. And I noticed how the 3 Krellian students, Vorn, Drix, and Taka, started watching her. The Krellians were, well, they were exactly what you'd expect from a warrior culture that settled disputes with ritualized combat. Large, muscular, covered in ridged scales that could deflect most conventional weapons. They weren't bullies, not technically. They just had very strong opinions about the hierarchy of strength, and humans, with their fragile skin and lack of natural weapons, ranked somewhere below domesticated nutrition animals. It started small. Vorn would accidentally bump into Mira in the corridors. Drix would make comments just loud enough for her to hear. Wonder why they even let Deathworlders enroll if they can't handle basic physical protocols. Mira never reacted. She'd just smile, apologize even when it wasn't her fault, and move on. "She's too passive," Vecna said. One day, watching Mira navigate around Taka, who had deliberately positioned himself to block the equipment locker. For a species that supposedly conquered their entire planet through aggression, she's remarkably soft. I didn't respond, but I kept watching. The incident happened on a 4th day, which meant most students had early dismissal for cultural observation periods. The halls were nearly empty when I left advanced quantum mathematics. I was heading toward the transit station when I heard voices from the lower-level training wing. Specifically, I heard Vorn's voice, loud and aggressive. "We just want to see what makes humans so special. That's all. Just a little demonstration." I shouldn't have gone closer. That's what every survival instinct in my Glorbian brain was screaming. But that same brain was also running probability calculations. 3 Krellians. 1 human. Empty corridor section. And Mira's voice, still polite but with something underneath it. Something that made my thermal regulation system kick into overdrive. "I really think you should let me leave now." I pulled up my personal comm device, accessing the security camera feeds. Every student had limited access for safety protocols. The training wing showed up on my screen, 4 camera angles covering the corridor where the voices were coming from. All 4 feeds were solid static. That's when my entire understanding of probability broke down, because security cameras at Xenith Academy don't just glitch. The system was Pelexian designed, with quantum redundancy and adaptive self-repair. The odds of 4 cameras in the same sector failing simultaneously were approximately 1 in 4.7 billion. I started recording on my personal device, audio only, and moved closer to the corridor junction. See, that's the thing about humans, Vorn was saying, and I could hear the grin in his voice. You're all talk, all this reputation, all this fear, but when it comes down to it, you're just soft little creatures who got lucky with your planet's evolution. I'm asking you one more time. Mira's voice had changed. Not louder, but different. Like someone had stripped away a costume she'd been wearing. Let me leave. Drix laughed. Or what? You'll file a complaint? Run to the administrators? Face it, human. You're alone down here. No witnesses. No cameras. Just us and you, and we're really curious about how much pressure that soft skin of yours can take before it breaks. There was a pause. In that pause, I swear I could hear my own circulatory system pumping too fast. Then Mira spoke again, and her voice was different in a way that made every prey species instinct in my Glorbian DNA scream at me to run. You know what's funny, she said, and she actually did sound amused. I've been trying so hard. For 3 months, I've been so careful. No sudden movements. No raised voices. Always smiling, always polite, always making myself smaller. Do you know why? Because you're weak? Taka growled. Mira laughed. Actually, laughed. Because I was terrified of this exact situation. Not because I thought you'd hurt me. Because I knew what I'd do if you cornered me. And I really didn't want to prove everyone right about humans. What are you babbling about? Vorn demanded. See, here's the thing about Earth, Mira continued, and her voice had gone soft again, but in a completely different way. Soft, like the sound a blade makes sliding out of a sheath. We don't have katan armor, we don't have scales, we don't have venom or claws or any natural weapons worth mentioning. Do you know what we have instead? Silence. We have persistence. We have pattern recognition. We have the ability to turn literally anything into a weapon. But most importantly, we have approximately 200,000 years of evolution on a planet that spent every single day trying to kill us. Every single day. We got good at not dying. Really good. Enough talk, Drix snarled. We're going to— There was a sound. I can't describe it properly. Something between a crack and a wet thump, followed immediately by Drix making a noise I'd never heard a Krellian make. Something between a wheeze and a scream. Oh, I'm sorry, Mira said, and she sounded genuinely apologetic again. Did that hurt? See, humans have this thing called adrenaline. When we're threatened, our bodies dump this chemical cocktail that lets us ignore pain, increases our strength, sharpens our reaction time, and turns off the part of our brain that says, maybe don't rip that limb out of its socket. It's really quite inconvenient for trying to fit into polite society. She broke his arm. Taka's voice had gone up an octave. She just— Drix, can you— Another sound. This one was definitely a crack. Bone, maybe. Or chitin. Hard to tell. 2 things, Mira said. And she sounded like she was teaching a class. Calm, methodical. First, you're not as armored as you think. Krellian joint structure has exactly 3 weak points where the scales don't quite connect. I've been memorizing them for 3 months, just in case. Second, human grip strength is approximately 1.4 times what you'd expect for our size. We literally evolved to hang from things and not let go, ever. Even when we're dead, sometimes. It's called a cadaveric spasm. Isn't that fascinating? Vorn, do something. Taka was backing up now. I could hear his scales scraping against the wall. I'm trying to— Vorn cut off with a sound like all his air being forced out at once. Solar plexus strike, Mira explained, still in that teaching voice. Humans figured out thousands of years ago that you don't need to break bones to incapacitate someone. You just need to disrupt their ability to breathe. It's very effective. Also temporary. Don't worry. He'll be fine in about 30 seconds. Well, fine-ish. He might vomit. That's normal. Taka made a run for it. I heard his heavy footfalls pounding toward the junction where I was frozen in place, trying to process what I was hearing. He didn't make it 3 meters. There was a sound like something heavy hitting the floor. Then Mira's voice, slightly out of breath now. You know what's really interesting about human evolution? We're pursuit predators. Our ancestors used to literally chase prey animals until they died of exhaustion. We're not fast in a sprint, but we don't stop. Ever. We just keep coming, and coming, and coming, until whatever we're chasing either fights or collapses. Please, Taka gasped. Please. We're sorry. Oh, now you're sorry. Mira's voice had an edge that could cut metal. Now that you realize the soft little human isn't so soft. Now that you're the one who's cornered and scared and hurt. Now you want mercy. The corridor went silent except for heavy breathing. 3 different respiratory patterns, all ragged, and Mira's breathing, which was slowing down, becoming controlled again. Here's what's going to happen, she said finally. You're going to go to the medical center. You're going to tell them you got into a sparring accident with each other. Because if you tell them what really happened, if you make me file an official report, then the administration is going to pull my full psychological profile. And they're going to see the parts I've been very carefully not mentioning. The parts about why Earth has so many different combat systems, about what humans do in wars, about what we're capable of when we stop pretending to be civilized. Another pause. And then they're going to realize that the only thing keeping you safe from me was my choice to be caned. And I really don't want them to know that. I like it here. I like pretending I'm just a normal student. I like being able to smile and apologize and not have people look at me like I'm a loaded weapon. So we're all going to keep this quiet, and you're never going to corner anyone again. Understood? 3 voices mumbled agreement. Good. Now get out of here before I remember that the adrenaline hasn't quite worn off yet. I heard movement. Rapid movement. Scales scraping, heavy footfalls, labored breathing. The 3 Krellians came around the corner where I was standing, and I got a good look at them. Drix's arm was hanging at an angle that was definitely wrong. Vorn was clutching his midsection, his face pale under his scales. Taka had a limp and was bleeding from somewhere under his shoulder plating. They saw me. For a moment, we all froze. Then Taka grabbed the others, and they half ran, half limped toward the medical center, leaving me alone in the junction. I should have left. I should have erased the audio recording, gone back to my quarters and pretended none of this happened. Instead, I moved toward the training wing corridor. Mira was sitting on the floor, back against the wall, hands shaking. She looked up when she heard me approach, and her face, gods, her face was the worst part. She looked absolutely devastated. Please don't report this, she said quietly. I didn't want. I tried so hard. She didn't finish, just put her head in her hands. I stood there, running calculations. I didn't want to run. Reaching conclusions I didn't want to reach. Humans lie about themselves. They make themselves smaller, softer, less threatening. They smile and apologize and pretend they're not walking arsenals wrapped in vulnerable skin. And we believe them, because the alternative is too terrifying to acknowledge. The security cameras were still glitching, all 4 of them. 1 in 4.7 billion odds. Unless, of course, someone who was very good with technology had made them glitch. Someone who had spent 3 months being underestimated and overlooked. Someone who knew exactly what would happen if there was video evidence. I deleted my audio recording, made sure it was completely gone. Then I sat down next to Mira, careful to maintain a respectful distance. I didn't see anything, I said. She looked at me, eyes red. Thank you. We sat there in silence as the adrenaline wore off and the security cameras mysteriously fixed themselves, one by one, flicking back to normal operation. And I realized that the scariest thing about humans wasn't their capacity for violence. It was their capacity for restraint. The fact that Mira had spent 3 months being gentle and kind, knowing the whole time exactly how many ways she could hurt everyone around her. The fact that she chose not to, until she didn't have a choice anymore. The next morning, I did something monumentally stupid. I showed up at Mira's quarters with 2 containers of hot beverage from the cafeteria. One was my usual thermal-regulated nutrition drink. The other was something the food synthesizer claimed was Earth coffee, though I suspected it was probably a generic approximation based on chemical analysis rather than the real thing. She answered the door, looking exhausted. Her eyes had that puffy quality that suggested either not enough sleep or too much crying. Possibly both. "Thanks," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "What are you doing here?" I held out the coffee. "Peace offering. Or solidarity offering. I'm not entirely sure which social protocol applies here." She stared at the container for a long moment, then took it with hands that still trembled slightly. "You really didn't have to do this." "I know. Can I come in? Unless you'd prefer to be alone, which is completely understandable given the circumstances." She stepped aside, letting me into quarters that were notably sparse compared to most students. Where others had decorations, personal items, mementos from home, Mira had the bare minimum: a sleep platform, a study terminal, and one small plant that looked like it was struggling to survive under the artificial lighting. "You're probably wondering why I haven't reported you," I said, sitting down on the only chair. Mira settled onto her sleep platform, wrapping both hands around the coffee container like it was anchoring her to reality. "I'm wondering why you're here at all. Most rational beings would have run in the opposite direction. I am extraordinarily rational. That's why I'm here." I took a calculated sip of my beverage, because the rational thing to do is understand what happened yesterday. Not what I think happened or what I fear happened, but what actually occurred. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "They cornered me." "You heard that part?" "I heard most of it." The audio was quite clear even if the video mysteriously was not. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Yeah. Funny how technology glitches sometimes. 1 in 4.7 billion odds. Hilarious." I leaned forward slightly. "Mira, I'm not here to judge you. I'm here because I need to recalibrate my entire understanding of human behavior. And you're the only human I know who might be willing to explain it." She took a long drink of the coffee, grimaced slightly at the taste, but kept drinking anyway. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. Start with why you've been pretending to be helpless for 3 months. That got a genuine laugh out of her, though it sounded bitter. "I haven't been pretending to be helpless. I've been pretending to be normal. There's a difference." She set down the coffee and pulled her knees up to her chest, a distinctly human posture that made her look even smaller. "Do you know what it's like being from Earth at a place like this? I can speculate, but I'd rather hear your perspective. Everyone knows what Earth is. Everyone's heard the stories. Deathworld, Category 9. The planet that tried to kill its own dominant species every single day, and somehow made them stronger instead of extinct. And they look at you and they expect." She gestured vaguely. "Something. A monster, maybe. Or a warrior. Or at least someone impressive. And you're not impressive? I'm a 17-year-old girl who likes math and old books and wants to study xenobiology. I cry during sad movies. I'm afraid of heights, which is really inconvenient on a planet with this much vertical architecture. I laugh too loud at jokes that aren't that funny. I'm just normal. For a human. Normal," I repeated. "You incapacitated 3 Krellian warriors in under 2 minutes. That's the problem." She stood up, started pacing. "That's exactly the problem. Because yeah, I can do that. Any human teenager with basic self-defense training could do that. It's not special. It's not impressive. It's just what happens when you grow up on a world where everything is constantly trying to eat you or poison you, or crush you. You learn how to not die. It becomes automatic." She stopped pacing, turned to face me. "But here in the wider galaxy that makes us terrifying, that makes us weapons. And I didn't want to be a weapon. I wanted to be a student. I wanted to make friends. I wanted to learn about other species and cultures and maybe, just maybe, prove that humans could be more than their violent reputation." "So, you made yourself smaller," I said, understanding clicking into place. "I made myself non-threatening. I smiled and apologized and acted like I was fragile. because that's what everyone expected anyway. And it worked. For 3 months, it worked. People talked to me, sat near me in the cafeteria, treated me like I was just another student instead of a potential threat. Until yesterday. She sat back down heavily. Until yesterday. Until 3 idiots decided that cornering the quiet human girl would be fun, would prove something about their strength or status, or whatever garbage excuse they told themselves. "What did you do to the security cameras?" I asked. Specifically, for my own educational precautions, she gave me a look that was part amusement, part weariness. "You really want to know?" "I really want to know." "Fine. There's a maintenance access panel 3 corridors over from the training wing. If you know the right frequency, you can broadcast a localized electromagnetic pulse that disrupts the quantum entanglement the cameras use for data transmission, without actually damaging the hardware. It reads as a glitch, but it's completely deliberate. I figured it out in week 2, just in case I ever needed it." "Just in case," I echoed. "You've been planning for this possibility since you arrived." "Thanks. I've been planning for this possibility since I was 12 years old and decided I wanted to Earth. You don't survive in the wider galaxy as a human without contingency plans. Lots of them. I processed that information, running it through every analytical framework I had. The Krellians. Will they report what actually happened? No, they're too ashamed. In their culture, being beaten by someone they considered inferior is worse than the injuries themselves. They'll stick to the sparring accident story, because the alternative means admitting they lost to someone they thought was weak. She rubbed her face tiredly. "Which means I get away with it. Again." "Again?" She looked at me for a long moment, then seemed to make a decision. "This isn't the first time something like this has happened. Not here, but back on Earth. Different circumstances, same basic situation. Someone thought I'd be easy prey. Found out I wasn't, and I've spent every day since then trying to be gentler, kinder, less threatening, because I never wanted to see that look on someone's face again." "What look?" "The look you had when you came around that corner. Terror. Not of being hurt yourself, but of what you discovered, of what I was capable of. That's the look every human knows, the one we spend our whole lives trying to avoid seeing on people we care about." The pieces were assembling into a picture I wasn't sure I wanted to see. "Mira, how much of human behavior is about managing other species' fear of you?" She smiled, but there was no humor in it. "How much time do you have? Because that's a long conversation." "I have as much time as you're willing to give me." She pulled her knees back up to her chest. "Okay. So, human history. We spent about 200,000 years at the top of Earth's food chain. But it wasn't because we were the strongest or the fastest or the most dangerous. We were persistence hunters. Endurance specialists. We'd chase prey until it literally collapsed from exhaustion. We'd track wounded animals for days. We'd remember grudges for years and plan elaborate revenge. We were the monsters that never stopped coming. That's consistent with the reputation, I said carefully. Right. But here's the thing nobody talks about. Somewhere along the way, we got smart enough realized that being the scariest thing on the planet was lonely. So we started domesticating things. Wolves became dogs. Wild cats became house cats. We took apex predators and turned them into companions through patience and food and genuine affection. I've read about human bonding with other species. It's considered unusual. It's not unusual for us. It's instinctive. We see something, anything, and part of our brain immediately asks, can I be friends with this? We've domesticated over 40 different species. We keep animals that could kill us as pets. We form emotional attachments to robots, to stuffed toys, to fictional characters. We anthropomorphize everything because we're desperately social creatures who hate being alone. She took another drink of the terrible coffee. So, when we left Earth and met the wider galaxy, we came prepared for 2 possibilities. 1, that we'd be the scariest thing out here and would need to be very, very careful about managing that. 2, that we'd find new friends among the stars. Most humans were really hoping for option 2. What did you find instead? We found out that everyone had already heard about us. Deathworld survivors. Persistence predators. species that conquered their entire planet through aggression and adaptation. And they were all terrified before they even met us. So we adapted again, the way we always do. We made ourselves smaller. We smiled a lot. We learned to apologize constantly. We tried to be the friendly humans, the harmless humans, the humans you don't need to be afraid of. But you're not harmless, I said. No, we're really not. But we're trying to be, and that should count for something. She looked at me with those two soft eyes that I now understood were actually calculating trajectories and weak points and escape routes, even while having a friendly conversation. Do you understand now why I reacted the way I did? Why I'm so upset about it? Because you failed at being harmless. Because I proved everyone right about humans. Because 3 idiots couldn't leave well enough alone, and now you know what I'm actually capable of, and I can't take that back. You're going to look at me differently now. Everyone who finds out is going to look at me differently. I considered my next words carefully. You're right, I am going to look at you differently. But not in the way you think. She raised an eyebrow. How, then? Yesterday, I thought humans were dangerous because of their capacity for violence. Today, I think humans are dangerous because of their capacity for restraint. You spent 3 months being gentle when you could have been dominant. You gave Vorn and Drix and Taka multiple warnings when you could have simply acted. You used exactly as much force as necessary to protect yourself and no more. That's not the behavior of a mindless weapon. That's the behavior of someone with extraordinary self-control. That's just basic human behavior, she protested. Any of us would have done the same thing. Exactly. Any human would have done the same thing. Do you understand how terrifying that is? Your entire species has this level of controlled lethality as a baseline, and you all choose every single day not to use it. That's not weakness. That's the most impressive display of collective willpower I've ever encountered. She blinked at me. Processing. That's a really weird compliment. It's not a compliment. It's an observation. Also, I'm going to need you to teach me human combat techniques. What? Why? Because now that I understand what happened yesterday, I realize that every human at this academy is walking around with the same capabilities you demonstrated. And some of them are not as controlled as you are. If I'm going to survive the next 3 years here, I need to understand human combat methodology, for defensive purposes only. She laughed, a real laugh this time. Thex, you're a Glorbian. Your species doesn't fight, correct? We negotiate, we administrate, we facilitate. But we also adapt when presented with new information. And the new information is that physical conflict at this academy is inevitable, and I am woefully unprepared for it. So, will you teach me? She studied me for a long moment. You're serious, completely serious. I'll even pay standard tutoring rates. I don't want your money. But, she tilted her head thoughtfully. If you're really interested, I could use someone to practice with. Someone who won't underestimate me or assume I'm fragile. And someone who'll tell me if I'm being too aggressive. I can do that. Though I should warn you, Glorbians are not physically impressive specimens. That's fine. Most of human martial arts is about using technique instead of strength anyway. Size and power matter less than leverage and timing. She stood up, offered me her hand in the human gesture of agreement. Okay, deal. But this stays between us. I don't need the entire academy knowing that I'm teaching combat classes. I took her hand, noting how carefully she controlled her grip strength. Agreed. This remains confidential. We shook on it, and I felt the slight tremor still running through her fingers. The adrenaline from yesterday hadn't completely left her system yet. She was still running hot, still on edge, still ready to fight even while she was trying to be gentle. That's when I finally understood the real tragedy of the human condition. They were predators trying desperately to be prey animals. Weapons trying to be tools. Monsters trying to be friends. And the galaxy kept forcing them to be monsters. Over the next few weeks, things shifted at Xenith Academy in subtle ways. Vorn, Drix, and Taka stuck to their sparring accident story. But the medical staff weren't idiots. Krellians didn't injure each other that specifically during practice. Word spread quietly through the student body that something had happened, though nobody knew exactly what. The way people looked at Mira changed. Not dramatically, but enough to notice. They gave her more space in the corridors. Conversations got quieter when she entered the cafeteria. She went from invisible to visible, and not in the way she'd wanted. Our training sessions became my favorite part of the week. Mira was a patient teacher, breaking down complex movements into manageable components. She taught me how humans thought about combat, about angles and momentum and using an opponent's strength against them. The key thing about human martial arts, she explained during our 4th session, is that we assume we're fighting something bigger and stronger than us, because on Earth, we usually were. So everything is about efficiency, minimum effort, maximum effect. Make them defeat themselves. I was terrible at it. My Glorbian physiology wasn't designed for rapid movement or complex physical maneuvers. But I learned anyway, because understanding human combat doctrine was valuable in ways that went beyond self-defense. "You're thinking too much," Mira said as I fumbled through a basic redirection technique for the 3rd time. "Your species processes everything analytically, right? Multiple parallel thought streams, correct? We typically run between 8 and 12 simultaneous analysis threads during complex tasks. That's your problem. Combat is about reaction, not analysis. You need to turn off the thinking and let your body move." She demonstrated the technique again, fluid and precise. "See? No thought. Just movement. My species doesn't do no thought. That's neurologically impossible for us." "Then, do one thought. Pick one thing to focus on and ignore everything else. Simplify until it's Audic." I tried again, forcing my consciousness to narrow to a single focus point. It felt uncomfortable, limiting, but the technique worked slightly better. "Better," Mira grinned. "You're learning. Give it another 10,000 repetitions and you'll love it down." 10,000? That's how humans learn physical skills. Repetition until it's muscle memory. Until your body knows the movement so well that your brain doesn't need to be involved. She grabbed a water container, took a long drink. "It's how we survive. Constant practice, constant improvement, constant adaptation." It sounds exhausting. It is. But it's also how we conquered our planet and made it to the stars. We don't quit. Ever. Even when we should. She sat down on the practice mat and her expression turned serious. "Thanks. Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why are you really doing this?" "Learning human combat, I mean. It's not just self-defense, is it?" I sat down across from her, considering my answer. "No, it's not just self-defense. I'm trying to understand your species. Really understand you, because humans are going to be increasingly important in galactic affairs, and most species are approaching you from a position of fear or dismissal. Neither position is accurate or useful. So we're what? A research project? No. You're a friend who I'm trying to understand better. There's a difference." I Oz, though I will admit the academic applications are intriguing. Glorbians pride ourselves on being the galaxy's best observers and analysts. Understanding humanity would be a significant contribution to Xenith psychology. She smiled. "At least you're honest about it." Then her smile faded. "The thing is, I don't think you can truly understand humans without understanding Earth. And I'm not sure that's something I can teach you." "Why not?" "Because Earth is. It's hard to explain to someone who's never been there. Other species see the statistics and the danger classifications, and they think they understand, but they don't. They don't know what it's like to grow up in a place where the weather can kill you, where the water can poison you, where plants have evolved toxins and animals have evolved armor and everything is constantly in competition for survival." She pulled up her personal terminal, showed me images, vast oceans, towering mountains, dense forests, barren deserts. This is Earth. Every one of these environments is actively hostile to human life without protective equipment. And humans live in all of them anyway. We build cities in earthquake zones. We farm in areas prone to floods. We inhabit regions with extreme temperatures and dangerous wildlife, and we call it home. It looks, I searched for the right word, beautiful. It is beautiful. It's the most beautiful place in the universe, and it's been trying to kill us since before we had language. That's what shapes humans. Not just the danger, but the love. We love our terrible, beautiful, deadly planet so much that we can't help but see everything else through that lens. Every world we visit, we look for the danger and the beauty both. Every species we meet, we wonder if we can be friends with them, despite the risk. She closed the terminal. That's what you need to understand about us. We're not violent because we enjoy it. We're violent because we come from violence, and we're trying every day to be something better than what our evolution made us. And sometimes we succeed, and sometimes we fail, and we feel guilty either way. I sat with that for a moment, processing the implications. That's a very lonely way to exist. Yeah. She looked tired suddenly. It really is. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, two beings from vastly different backgrounds trying to bridge a gap that most of the galaxy assumed was unbridgeable. Finally, Mira stood up and offered me her hand again. Come on, let's run through that technique one more time. You were almost getting it. I took her hand, let her pull me up, and we went back to practice. Human and Glorian, predator and administrator, trying to understand each other through repeated motion and shared effort. And somewhere in those movements, in those careful teachings and patient corrections, I realized that this was how humans built bridges. Not through grand diplomatic gestures or political negotiations, but through small moments of connection, through teaching and learning, through choosing again and again to be gentle when they could be dangerous. The galaxy thought humans were terrifying because of their capacity for violence, but the galaxy had it backwards. Humans were terrifying because of their capacity for kindness despite the violence, because they chose, every single day, to be better than what their evolution demanded. That was the real human superpower. Not their endurance or their adaptability or their tool use. It was their stubborn, persistent, impossible optimism that despite everything, despite all the evidence to the contrary, people could be good, even humans, especially humans. As we finished our training session and prepared to return to our respective quarters, Mira stopped me at the door. Thanks, Thex, for not running away, for trying to understand instead of just being afraid. Thanks for not breaking my arm when I showed up uninvited with terrible coffee. She laughed. The coffee really was terrible, wasn't it? Spectacularly bad. I'll do better next time. Next time, she echoed, and smiled. A real smile, not the carefully constructed one she wore for the rest of the academy. I'd like that. I walked back to my quarters running probability calculations. The odds of a Glorbian and a human becoming genuine friends. The odds of that friendship changing both of their perspectives. The odds of that small change rippling outward, affecting how other species viewed humans. The numbers were impossible to calculate with any accuracy. Too many variables. Too much uncertainty. Too much depending on choices neither of us had made yet. But as I settled into my sleep alcove and began my nightly analysis routine, I found myself hoping, which was not a typical Glorbian behavior. Hope was illogical, unpredictable, and wonderfully human. Maybe some things were contagious after all.